Alright, ladies and gentlemen, JD here with Timber and Anvil, full-length feature video showing some etching of the two recent crucibles that I did between um, yesterday the 18th of July and today the 19th of July. So the first first ingot I should say we're going to cover is the one from yesterday the 18th, and that's what we're looking at right now. The device that I'm using is a little USB microscope. Bear with me and find the name for the thing. Tech Scope is the name of it. Um, it seems to work pretty well. I actually borrowed it from work. Hasn't been used in a while, so they didn't mind. So this is, again, yesterday's ingot, 18th July 2024, and this one had, it was a bit remarkable in that I did not have enough glass in the charge, and therefore during heating, while the metal was hot and molten, the glass, my best explanation is that the glass wicked up the walls of the crucible, and it did so uniformly all the way around, and therefore that left an eye of about 2 centimeter diameter completely exposed in the middle, where the local atmosphere inside the crucible could contaminate the ingot. The crucible was otherwise sealed with satanite, which of course is not a perfect seal, but based on spark testing the ingot and obviously the sparking that I saw when I was grinding this flat face of the ingot to get these etch images, it certainly sparked like very, very, very high carbon steel. So I don't really suspect that I lost much. So what we're looking at is, you can see a whole bunch of lines that almost look like country borders on a map. Those are humongous grain boundaries. Pretty cool features, which I've never seen before, but they do lend themselves to making a weaker forging because they could become, there are spots, the light lines that you see that make those demarcations are, it's basically carbide precipitation at the grain boundaries, and that becomes a local area where the melting point of the steel is lower. So if I get this too hot, those are all going to just turn into points where the ingot's just going to crumble like a cookie. So I would probably be really wise to roast this ingot at something like 1800 degrees Fahrenheit for, I don't know, a couple hours before I start hammering away on it. So let's stay at the same magnification level and check out the other ingot, the one that I did today, which is right here. So the one I did today, have to focus a little bit, they're not the exact same height. It's pretty good. The one I did today, I used a double charge of glass relative to yesterday's example. So this one had 40 grams of glass, and upon completion, when I took the lid off, as you guys saw in the YouTube short, the glass was perfectly smooth and completely covering the ingot. Therefore, there was no exposed eye in the center like there was on yesterday's crucible. So what I'm seeing here is no sign of humongous carbides, humongous grain boundaries. I'm seeing a remarkably uniform structure here. And you see some coloration, and I do not think that that's attributed to the camera. I think that's actual coloration. These both ingots were etched with a solution called nitol, N-I-T-O-L, which is a mixture of ethanol and concentrated nitric acid, such that the concentration of nitric acid is 3.5%, and then the balance is ethanol. So I made that solution actually at work because I don't have access to nitric acid at home. But anyhow, really didn't take much. But Nitric acid is an oxidizing acid, and when you temper a steel and you see those pretty colors like blues and straw and so on and so forth, those are oxide layers building up, getting thicker and thicker as the temperature of your steel is increasing. It is reacting more and more with oxygen, and as those layers get thicker and thicker, they scatter light more and more from sort of that yellowish side of the spectrum to a blue, and then ultimately purple. And once you get past purple, then the material approaches an iridescence, where it starts glowing in the dark. So what we see here look like tempering colors. This blue feature up by the top of it, which is kind of right in the middle of the screen right now. So that's exactly the same thing that we would see if I heated this steel up to about 450 degrees or so. We would see blue colors from iron oxide formation. And the nitric acid is going to do the same exact thing, but it's going to do so at room temperature because it's an oxidizing acid. It has an abundance of oxygen within it, and is therefore going to oxidize the steel in much the same fashion. So the coloration that you kind of see within this quite fascinating and really, really tight crystal structure, those colors are reflective of the oxidation layers. So pretty cool feature. We're going to go ahead and zoom in now and take a closer look just a little bit at a time. This microscope does have a pretty good zoom capability. I'm pretty impressed. Now, another point to make is that both samples are they were sanded on my 2x72 belt grinder up to a 320 grit finish. Now, typically in metallurgical analysis, you grind up to a micron finish and etch with the same nitol acid, and doing so gives you basically no defects on your on the micro features, the microstructures of your steel. And I did not do that. You can see straight lines running from kind of top center, maybe 1 o'clock or 12:30 if you look at a clock, and then going down to about 6:30. These straight striations are scratch marks from the 320 grit belt, and you can kind of see those features reflected throughout. But you can certainly see microstructures beyond those scratch patterns. The reason I didn't bother going all the way up to like a micron finish and everything like that is because I wanted to be practical about this. And what I mean by practical is I'm presumably going to make knives out of this material, and you can absolutely bet your sweet bippy I will not be polishing those knives up to a micron finish, hand sanding, etc., and then etching. I'm going to be sanding them up to about a 320 grit finish, maybe 400, and what you see is what you get. So I wanted the etch that I studied with this little microscope to be reflective of what you would actually see in a finished knife made from this steel. But I'm really, really loving the coloration that I'm seeing here. It's pretty cool. But again, in this ingot, which is the one made on 19th July 2024, I am really not seeing any massive carbide boundaries like we saw in yesterday's ingot. Both crucible melts are functionally the same metallurgy, the same composition. They're using the same steel pallet banding material and EDM graphite. A friend of mine in the blacksmith club gave me, goodness, probably 30 pounds of, actually probably more than 30 pounds of EDM graphite blocks from a machine shop that were given to him. And EDM graphite is essentially calcined petroleum or coal tar. Calcined meaning it's burned at a really high temperature in a reducing atmosphere, and then it's bound together with coal tar pitch and compressed at very high pressures, and then baked to dry out any residual liquid from the coal tar pitch, and you're left with a pretty stinking hard, essentially pure carbon block that you can machine for EDM, I think it's like electrical discharge machining or something like that. But anyhow, that's what I'm using as my carbon source in this particular context. Alternatively, I have used pig iron in the past and will continue to do so, but I wanted to see how things worked out when I used EDM graphite because I have so much of it. The preparation for the EDM graphite is I have these blocks that are, a couple inches square, they vary in geometry, and I simply grind them on my 2x72 belt grinder, 36 grit, and just collect the dust in a cup, and then transfer it into my crucible, which is tared on a little top loader balance that has a 10 milligram resolution. So I'm able to know the mass of carbon that I'm adding to a pretty good extent, a pretty good level of precision. So at this same magnification level, let's go ahead and take a look at yesterday's ingot. So again, this one's from 18th July 2024. And we see a whole lot of needle-like structures here. I would certainly not attribute that to scratch pattern from a belt because all these lines are interrupted. So I really don't think that's a feature attributed to my lack of polishing. And again, we're seeing more of a close-up view of these borders, these grain boundaries. It's a little bit messed up because the way the light is introduced in this little microscope, it's got a built-in light. You don't see the reflection of carbide formation on the grain boundaries in the center of your field of view. You see it off to the periphery. Let's fix our zoom a little bit better there. That's good. And so we can see that even though we've got effectively the exact same metallurgical composition in terms of starting material added to the crucible, we have very different features because we had more of an oxidizing environment in this one because we had that the center portion of the ingot exposed to the ambient environment within the crucible. So I think ultimately we're going to have to treat these very differently when it comes to forging, but I would assume that we'll still be able to get a good finished product out of either one because they're both, if you do the math on the steel banding that I added, which was 305 grams in both cases, and 5 grams of carbon, that comes to about 1.7% carbon in the finished product, and that's assuming that the pallet banding material is, 100% uptaking all of the carbon that I added, which I'm not sure, but it's an approximation. But regardless, it's a boatload of carbon content, so I would expect to see some pretty good etching here. So let's real quick check my math. 3 divided by 305. Oh, that's 1.6%, not 1.7. So it should be somewhere around there. So anyhow, let's continue on and zoom in a little bit more and see what else we can see. Alright, we're seeing similar coloration like we did on the other ingot. And again, you're able to see a much closer picture of these humongous grain boundaries. And again, as this steel is heated up, if I don't sort of pre-treat it to try and shrink these carbides, I'm going to risk having a piece of steel that would have essentially flaws in it when it comes to forging, where these grain boundaries would become sort of a liquid phase while the surrounding material around them is still solid phase, and I could have a ingot that crumbles, kind of like cast iron. So we'll see how it goes. But we're still seeing, beyond that, some pretty cool features here. Nice crystalline repeating units. And so let's go ahead and take a look at today's ingot under this same level of magnification. Here we are. It's not the clearest picture, but you can still definitely see sort of a repeating crystal pattern, which I think is super freaking cool. The only caveat here is that, I make this into a knife and etch it, you're not really going to see this unless you put that knife under a microscope, but what fun is that? Generally, in terms of making blades and stuff out of this, what I am attempting to call roots steel, the goal is to have quite a heterogeneous composition in terms of carbide structure, very heavy carbide formation along grain boundaries, so that when you etch it at a 300, 400 grit, you're going to be able to see macro structures, not microstructures, because nobody's going to be looking at the knife with a microscope. They want to see a knife that, with the naked eye, holding it in their hand, they can see, a patternation or a bunch of ornate features within the steel. But I have this little microscope right now, and so I just want to take you guys along for what kind of stuff we can see with it. I think it's pretty gnarly. I don't know how well we're going to be able to see as we zoom in here. Kind of getting to the limit of the resolution of this camera, or microscope I should say, but that's pretty stinking cool. Bear with me, it's a little shaky. Trying to get as clear a picture as I can. Very nice. Let's pop over to yesterday's ingot. Ooh, wrong way. There we go. It looks more disordered, in my opinion. It looks quite a bit more disordered than the one I made today. More chaotic. But they were otherwise made the same, so really the only difference here is that exposed region in the middle of the ingot that really changed things up in our end composition, apparently. Alright, so I'm going to zoom out from here, and I want to see these crucibles from the top to take a look at dendrite formations. We'll begin with yesterday's, which has the mega gnarly eye in the middle of it. We're going to zoom way out because we're looking at big stuff here. Yeah, so we're kind of right in the dead center of this ingot and migrating out to the periphery of the eye. And you can see these dendrites. Every time I look at this with the naked eye, I see a sandworm from Dune with all the little hairy teeth kind of things that emanate from the periphery of the worm's mouth. This totally looks like a dune sandworm. Pretty gnarly. Check out the gorgeous colors here. Again, that is oxide formation. Basically, the ingot was completely covered in glass and so protected from oxygen in the periphery, not obviously in the middle. But I chipped away the glass when it was at elevated temperatures such that it formed those iron oxides that then scatter light and appear as colors. So as I'm looking around the ingot past the massive crater in the middle, I'm really not seeing any semblance of dendrites at all. So all that I'm seeing in dendrite structures is what's in that exposed area. So that's kind of interesting. And now let's compare that with today's example. And we'll see a much different picture. Yeah. Really gorgeous colors here. Look at that. That is beautiful. We'll zoom in on that a little bit. But this is what I'm talking about with dendrite formation. So we're here kind of at the periphery of the ingot, kind of falling off the side of it. And you can see everywhere we have really beautiful dendrites. That's just beautiful. I do not think I've ever had this beautiful of dendrite formation on a crucible ingot since I have been on this campaign. And you see the sharp wall here. It's not round because that's the area that we ground away for etching. But I have never seen this thorough coverage of dendrite formation on the periphery of a crucible in this whole campaign. I've seen some good stuff, but not like this. So I really think the combination of glass inside the crucible and sealing the crucible with Satanite refractory is definitely the way to go, because these results seem to be quite a bit better than what I've seen before. And defects that I'm seeing within the ingots, I'm kind of just going to attribute that to the starting material, the pallet banding. There's the actual clips that clamp pallet banding together are, I'm pretty sure, galvanized because they remained bright. They were, they were not rusted at all, so I would assume that they're galvanized, whereas the pallet banding in large was slightly rusty in some areas. Very obviously not galvanized, it wasn't silvery. So I think that having that zinc in the melt is going to play a role in some of the issues that I've got going on. I don't know, I'm speculating on that, but I don't think it's a good thing to have zinc in there. So ultimately I don't have very good metallurgical control in these examples, but otherwise I think they turned out pretty good. So let's go ahead and zoom in a bit on this because I want to take a look at these really beautiful structures at a closer view. Nice. That is gorgeous. I'm going to have to buy one of these little microscopes. They're $90. And based on what I'm seeing here, I think that's definitely worth it based on my continued campaign in this crucible steel. Man, you've never seen anything like that. The colors, everything is just beautiful. Wow. What you're seeing here is glass that I can't chip out. It's in like these little craters that are just all over the surface of this ingot. I still have not figured out why I get these craters, and therefore I still have not figured out how to not get craters. I've always had them. I don't know if it's something inherent to using an induction forge versus using a coke forge or a propane, forced air propane forge for crucible steel. I'm not going to find out until I build a forced air propane forge for this campaign. But in the meantime, general rule of thumb with forging crucible steel ingots or Wootz steel ingots is that you weld on a bar to use as a handle to the top of the ingot, because it's widely assumed, or I guess known, that the top of the ingot is where all the nastier crap, the grander impurities, kind of migrate with slag, essentially. Like any other molten metal, the slag always floats to the top, and the good steel, the good material, is in the bottom. So we won't really worry about the pockmarks too much. Let's zoom in a little more, shall we? That is pretty incredible. It's like every color of the rainbow represented in this. Here's your yellows, oranges, reds. We've already seen blues and violets. I guess we haven't seen green. Kind of looks like a tinge of green there. Definitely green there. That is quite fascinating. Hope you guys are enjoying this. It's 27 minutes of me rambling on and showing some pretty cool footage here. Stuff that I myself have never seen because I have not been able to use this camera before. I frankly forgot about it. I wish I'd thought of this much earlier. This is quite extraordinary. Wow. It's like little lumps of iron carbides, I'm guessing. This is the max zoom level with this little scope. And frankly, I'm pretty pleased with the clarity of the image. Quite awesome. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here. I really hope at least some of you guys stick through the entire length of the video, 30 minutes basically, and I really hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions about my methods on making crucible steel, I got nothing to hide. I don't think I gain anything or lose anything by sharing all the knowledge that I have, so somebody else can succeed. That's kind of the whole point as I see it. I don't know what's going on here. It looks like, no, that's probably from my glove. Fibers from the Kevlar gloves I was wearing, because obviously it got hot while I was grinding on it. Ooh, I went wrong way. Now we're in some glass here. There we go. Alrighty, I'll go ahead and call it here. Thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope maybe you learned something from it. And I'm pretty confident you guys have seen some footage that you've never seen before on any other channel. I would recommend you guys check out another YouTube channel called Heavy Forge. A gentleman by the name of Spencer, I don't remember his last name, but he does much larger Crucible Woots steel ingots, and he does a much better job of it. He has a forced air propane forge and a forging press, so he's able to make much larger forgings, having a hydraulic forging press. But I don't have the resources for one, so hand and hammer is all I've got, and therefore 4-pound ingots of really tough steel is pretty much out of the question for me. But the propane, the forced propane forge, forced air, lends itself to much better performance, I think, in the production of crucible steel, because you have a much larger thermal mass attributed to the body, the refractory lining of the forced air propane forge, and that itself will help to slow down the cooling rate of the crucible ingot, which then allows for when you slow down the solidification of something that forms crystals, those crystals get much bigger because they have more time to grow as the phase transitions from liquid to solid. It's the same reason why snowflakes are generally really big when the temperature is right around the freezing point, because at that temperature it takes them a very long time to transition from liquid drops of humidity or whatever in a cloud to solid snowflakes. However, yeah, so Spencer on Heavy Forge, his Woots ingots will look way better than mine. Way more prominent macro structures that are easily visible with the naked eye holding a finished knife, because those 4-pound ingots, that's 4 pounds of steel mass, which is going to take a very long time to cool down, a very long time to phase transition from liquid to solid. And so he's going to have way bigger structures than I'm going to have, at least as long as I do it in an induction forge, where it's going to be cooling down immediately, because the induction forge inherently does not have thermal mass. So anyhow, I'll go ahead and quit rambling. Again, I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I really would appreciate it if you'd hit the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you have any questions whatsoever. I am all about sharing my knowledge, trials and errors and so on and so forth with you guys. I really don't have anything to gain by keeping all of my sort of trade secrets to myself. I think it's nonsensical. I'm not in this for making money. I'm in it for kind of having fun, experimenting, and sharing what I do with a broader audience. I have a full-time job that pays me well enough to cover the bills, so I don't have to, I'm not trying to get rich from YouTube. So anyhow, yeah, thanks a lot. I really would appreciate seeing bigger head count in my subscribers. I don't even have 100 yet. So stay tuned, keep watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Bye now.